right. And then one other thing to just mention, Zoom bombing, I certainly don't anticipate this from this crowd today. I don't think the gardening crowd is too wild out there. But certainly there are folks out there that can break security walls and come on and either say obscene things or draw obscene images. If that happens, again, I don't anticipate that. But if you want, you can either shut your computer, turn the camera off, mute the lines, and it takes about a minute or two for me to remove that person. But just wanted to make you aware in case that happened today. But again, don't think that's going to take place. So as mentioned, for those of you who might just have joined a little bit later, I'm Jamie Weiss, Habitat Hero Coordinator for Audubon Rockies. And the whole goal of this program is to plant a better world for birds and people by giving birds a place to nest, to find food, to seek shelter. We are giving a better world for birds and our community members as well. And that's the core idea behind this program. And we at Audubon Rockies, we are a regional office of National Audubon, and we now cover the states of Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah. And we work with a variety of partners. We work with other nonprofits, businesses, nurseries, schools, you name it. And the whole goal is to actively restore our habitat, not just for birds, pollinators, but other critters as well. And these individuals, or we like to call them habitat heroes, do three things. They're increasing our natural areas, they're providing food and homes for our wildlife, and the third and most important piece, they're creating these small habitat patches that connect to the overall landscape. So literally helping to stitch back our landscape one garden at a time. And we empower engagement through a variety of platforms. Our biggie is our online or in-person programming. Each year we hold between 70 and 75 events and reach over 3,000 people. We also have a certification program where you can certify your garden. We now have over 275 Habitat Hero certifications. And we also have a robust volunteer network. We had 158 volunteers lend a helping hand last year, whether that was coming out to a planting event, helping out at a demonstration garden with weeding, being featured on a garden tour, giving a presentation in the community. There's lots of ways that our volunteers give back. And if you're interested in that, feel free to join our Wildscape Ambassador Network. We have over 745 ambassadors or volunteers that we work with in the community. And I'll talk a minute about our online our online resource library that's robust. We just enhanced it just these past few weeks. And we also have our social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, so you can stay up to date on all our current happenings and tips for gardening. And then we also have demonstration gardens throughout town. In fact, Jim Tolstrup with High Plains Environmental Center helped us on two of our gardens, one in Old Town Square and the other at the Loveland Visitor Center. So go out and check out our demonstration gardens, get inspired by these native plants that hopefully you can bring home to your own gardens as well. So what is a habitat hero? Again, we're not going to spend much time delving into this. This is a whole presentation in and of itself. This is just a 10,000-foot view of really looking at trying to create a garden that's full of native plants. Jim's going to really hit on that. Creating it in a way where you have your canopy, your mid-story, your understory, diversity in colors and textures and bloom times, you name it. Having a water source is really beneficial for our birds and pollinators for drinking and bathing. Being more cognizant of removal of invasive or certainly your non-native, removal of non-native and certainly your invasive plants that can degrade your habitat and beyond. And the reduction of chemical fertilizers and pesticides on our landscapes. Also looking at elimination of hazards, so whether that be keeping your cats inside or reflectives on your windows as you're inviting your feathered friends over, making it a safe and inviting space as well. And then also there's certainly other components that you can do to enhance your landscape, brush piles and leaving leaf litter and adding pollinator houses and birdhouses are some of the ways to enhance your landscape without even using plants. And then community science. Have your yard or your garden become a living laboratory and conduct some of those community science projects for different conservation organizations out there. And then also we love our volunteers, so think about volunteering with us as well. Again, I will send all of this up in a follow-up email. I just quickly glanced over what the Habitat Hero program is all about. The real star today is Jim Tolstrup at High Plains Environmental Center. If you are curious to check out the Habitat Hero website and our new resource library, I have the link up, rockies.audubon.org/Habitat Hero, and it's now listed in a stepwise fashion to where you can learn about native plants, search for native plants with our native plant database via your zip code. You can design your Habitat Hero garden or look at some of our pre-planned gardens in our downloadable booklets, and then our step-by-step process on certifying your garden as well. Here's Jim. You can also see him live on camera today. And he's the executive director at High Plains Environmental Center in Loveland. It's certainly a place worth checking out. It's a unique model for preserving the native biodiversity in the midst of development. His past work includes serving as land steward of the Shambhala Mountain Center and running his own landscape design business in Maine, where he installed gardens at George and Barbara Bush's summer White House. That's pretty cool. He received a certificate in gardening arts from the Landscape Institute of Harvard University and Arnold Arboretum. He teaches widely throughout Colorado, has written numerous articles on gardening and environmental stewardship, and has received multiple awards from landscape design firms like Plant Select, ALSA, ALCC, and Denver Water. And he's also been a wonderful supporter with Audubon Rockies over the years. I mentioned the demonstration gardens. He's helped with various events, and we've always appreciated our relationship with High Plains Environmental Center and having him join us today live. And before he jumps into his presentation, I'm going to share a video, a brand new video that High Plains Environmental Center released this year. So sit back and relax while you enjoy that video.
Here at the High Plains Environmental Center, we're very focused on native plants. We grow native plants in our nursery. We have these demonstration gardens here to help people understand how to grow these plants and how beautiful they are and how important they are to wildlife. These plants evolved here in Colorado. They're well adapted to our high And the amazing thing about it is you can sit here and watch honeybees and tiny little native bees, bumblebees, but this particular plant is really cool. This is called Desert 4 o'clock. These demonstration gardens here at the High Plains Environmental Center, we're very focused on native plants. We grow native plants in our nursery. We have these demonstration gardens here to help people understand how to grow these plants and how beautiful they are and how important they are to wildlife. These plants evolved here in Colorado. They're well adapted to our high winds, arid climate, and bright sun, and they have very important relationships to the wildlife. There are a lot of plants that can only be pollinated by native bees and insects that provide very important food for birds and other wildlife, and they're beautiful. They belong here in Colorado, and we celebrate these plants and really hope other people will want to do so also. One of the reasons native plants are so important is they've co-evolved with the pollinators that depend on them. And a great example is this milkweed plant. The milkweed, like many other plants, is toxic to most insects, but the monarch butterfly has developed a tolerance for that toxicity and can eat the leaves. So the monarch butterfly will lay her eggs on this plant. The eggs will hatch and the caterpillars will eat the leaves. When the monarch matures, it will come back and feed only on milkweed plants, and in so doing, it will pollinate the milkweed. So the milkweed plant depends on the monarch, and the monarch depends on the milkweed. And that is the perfect example of the symbiotic relationship between pollinators and their host plants. So here we are in our native plants garden. It's August 22nd, and this garden has never once been watered this year. It's full of flowers, it's lush. And the amazing thing about it is you can sit here and watch honeybees and tiny little native bees, bumblebees, but this particular plant is really cool. This is called Desert 4 o'clock, and it's really valuable to nighttime pollinators. Because it opens up in the nighttime and it closes in the mid-morning when it starts to get hot. It's just starting to open up now, and you'll see sphinx moths and other moths flying around it all night, which is really cool. Habitat is basically food, water, shelter, and space. And it's important that we design our gardens to be able to accommodate those things. So the food could be the flowers, the nectar, maybe fruit for birds, and having things like this American plum that provides both flowers and fruit. Water could be as simple as a bird bath or a pond. People over prune shrubs, and we need to have shrubs that are taller and layers in our landscape for different types of insects and birds, and nesting high up enough to be away from people. Also not be too aggressive about cleaning up our garden, because in the floor of the garden where we have leaves in the fall and so on, those could be sheltering insects and helping creatures get through the winter. And also a lot of the dead stems in wintertime, there are some insects that will overwinter inside those stems. So if we're cutting the flowers off and we're removing them from our garden, we may actually be removing beneficial pollinators from our garden. To learn more about our suburbitat vision, contact us at High Plains Environmental Center or suburbitat.org. Here.
Well, I'm so glad we got the video and sound to work. Thank you for bearing with us. And we're going to now invite Jim Tolstrup, who you saw in the video, but now you'll see live today as well, give his talk. And again, thanks for bearing with us as we work through some technological issues with us today.
Thanks so much, Jamie. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Good. This is only my third Zoom call, so like everyone else, I'm getting used to this new format. But and I'm glad that we got the video to work, because I always get such a huge kick out of looking at that, and it's cool to have like the whole vision sort of distilled into 4 minutes. But there's a lot in that you know, my background is in landscape design. And when I studied this, there wasn't so much focus on the function of the garden, the ecological function. And there was more like gardens should be pretty, gardens should be enjoyable to look at and for human beings. And people are realizing that we are taking so much space on this planet that we really need to invite other species to share our world and share the communities that we design. So that is entirely the focus of High Plains Environmental Center. We work with developers and communities to make their community a place that can invite nature and wildlife. And one of the things that early on, 10 or 12 years ago, we were encouraging people to use native plants in their gardens. Like it said in the video, there are these very intricate relationships between pollinators and plants, and even if we don't have the right plants, then we don't get the birds, we don't get the pollinators, the butterflies and native bees and so on. But the problem is, when you look around, there weren't native plants to buy. People weren't growing them, and even now, it's really relatively uncommon to actually find native plants in nurseries. And I'm working with a group that hosts the Landscaping with Colorado Native Plants conference every year. This February was our 5th year of hosting this conference, and it's entirely focused on that concept of how to get people interested in using native plants, and get landscape designers to design with native plants, and to get nurseries to grow native plants. So all of these things are co-evolving. You know, it's a question, where does it start? Does it start with the customer going into a nursery saying, like, I want native plants, or nurseries daring to grow them and hoping they can sell them, or landscape designers design them? And all these things have to work together. So we are growing the native plants and making them available at a reasonable cost to people. And we've grown, I think, 16,000 4-inch plants, and our nursery is just burgeoning with plants right now. And I want to show you on our website at suburbitat.org what our native plants look like. So now I'm going to try to share my screen and see how this works. Can you see my screen?
Looks good, Jim.
Okay, great. So this is what the screen looks like. And unfortunately, the plants aren't really in any logical order, but I'm just going to go through and talk about what some of the habitat benefits are here. This first one, the yellow Indian grass. So one of the things that the function of plants in the garden is sheltering. So as I mentioned in the video, scalping the plants and removing all the vegetation from the garden is devastating for wildlife in wintertime, because they need a place to be. They need that cover. And some of these, our native grasses, are really beneficial for that purpose, the sheltering. And also, there are definitely birds that eat the seeds of a lot of our native grasses. So yellow Indian grass is a warm season tall grass. And in places, not exactly riparian zones, but places that are like moist meadows in Colorado, you will find these native tall grasses. So Sorghastrum nutans, the yellow Indian grass, is one. Moving over to the next one, Achillea lanulosa. So these kind of flat, open flowers like this, tend to be attractive to generalist pollinators. So some flower shapes have evolved to only have certain butterflies that have a long tongue, or hummingbirds to feed on them. These flat disc flowers are very good for attracting native bees and generalist pollinators. This native yarrow is one that will spread readily in the garden. Some people like plants that spread and some don't. Personally, I like that plants will fill in. The cordgrass is another warm season tall grass. This one requires a fair bit of moisture. But if you have a place where there's a downspout in your yard and there tends to be a lot of moisture accumulating there, that is a great place to use this grass. Interestingly, this is one of the grasses that, this was the primary grass that was used for making sod roofs by the early pioneers. The little blue stem grass is very, very distinctive for its sort of reddish color in the winter time. This is one that birds will feed on the seed. And switchgrass is actually fairly common in landscaping. It's another warm season tall grass. The Missouri goldenrod is you can actually see there's a bee in the picture, but will also attract butterflies as well. You know, one of the things we want to have in our garden is things that will bloom early in the spring, mid-spring, early summer, midsummer, late summer, fall. So just, I think, like, I don't only eat in February, I eat throughout the whole year. And likewise, pollinators, it's nice to have something blooming all the time because it makes our garden beautiful, but it's also of great value to have something blooming all the time throughout the season to support pollinators. The Selene drummondii, the catch fly, that's a native plant that I don't actually know what pollinators, but I tend to think because of the tube-shaped flower, it's going to be like butterflies that have a long proboscis that they can get the nectar inside that flower. And that's one of the strategies that flowers have, is to limit who can feed on them. That way they're not wasting their pollen, but their pollen is more likely going to go to similar flowers. And that is that's one of the evolutionary strategies that makes the pollinator and the plant co-evolve in a relationship together. Senecio spartoides, the broom groundsel. This is a plant that people do not grow enough. A tremendous amount of insects are drawn to this, and the nice thing about it, it'll grow in incredibly dry places and in the hottest part of the year. Red birds and tree is a plant select plant that's native to the Southwest, and I don't know of a plant that is better for attracting hummingbirds. Hummingbirds will flock to this. The red color in the tube-shaped flower is very attractive for them. Rudbeckia laciniata and Rudbeckia hirta are very similar. The hirta, black-eyed Susan, only grows about 2 feet tall. The other one grows in wet areas and will grow about 4 feet tall. And again, this is one for generalist pollinators. The queen's crown is really kind of a rock garden plant. Ratibida, we have the red and the yellow, and these are really hardy plants that will grow with very little moisture. We're really excited about growing the silky phacelia, which grows more at higher altitudes, but just a stunning color, kind of a deep purple. I think Penstons are definitely the queens of the native garden. As you can see, there's a big fat bumblebee here. I think it's Bombus nevadensis with a little black spot on its shoulders. But also hummingbirds and a lot of native bees will be drawn to these plants. A number of penstemons won't release their pollen unless a bee is actually inside the flower vibrating the flower. So that's a part of the coevolution. They actually need the vibration of the bees to release their pollen. And there are many different colors here. The Whipple's penstemon is a dark purple. I see there's some kind of fly or bee inside that one too. Penstemon strictus is cool because it's evergreen, turns kind of a reddish color in the fall. Penstemon palmeri is pink, and that one needs a little bit of moisture. And Penstemon grandiflorus, as its name says, has very large flowers and is quite tall, about 30 inches tall. Very, very tolerant of drought. Penstemon etonii and also Penstemon barbatus below it are spectacular plants for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds like the color red, and they like tube-shaped flowers. Penstemon comerhensis is one that we haven't grown before, and that's shorter and a kind of a purple blue. Penstemon cyanus. Enothera is the evening primrose, which is native on the prairie and Front Range in Colorado. This next one, Enothera cespitosa, has really cool fuzzy leaves and fantastic white flowers that are about 3 inches across. This is extremely showy for a native plant. The next one is Pecos beargrass, which I actually got the seed from Paniote callidus at the Denver Botanic Gardens. And it's, I believe it occurs in southeastern Colorado, but it's found into Oklahoma and Texas. It's not actually a grass, but it's a flowering plant. Monarda fistulosa is great for bees, but also hummingbirds and butterflies. Just a stunning deep violet pink color in July. And this tends to grow by creek sides. It does require a little bit of moisture. The yellow monkey flower is a small flower, looks like sort of like a primrose, and this actually grows in creek sides, and it requires some moisture. The mentzelias, we have two different ones. The decapetala, which is a little larger and extremely showy, and nuda. The Mentzelia nuda is perennial, but the Mentzelia decapetala is monocarpic. So it's more or less like a biennial. It will flower one time and then die, but it'll cast its seeds and reseeds readily. These require no moisture. They'll actually plant them on a pile of gravel and never water them. They actually don't like any water at all. Macaranthera biglovia, the tansy aster, is blue. It blooms around the same time as rabbit brush, so you can get this beautiful yellow and purple combination. Requires absolutely no water and reseeds readily. Linum lewisii is an early spring flower. They're actually in bloom in our nursery now. That it's a short-lived perennial that will reseed in your garden. And the liatris, of which we grow 3, but Ligula stylus is the only one that we have currently available. But we restock and change this inventory based on new things that are coming out of our greenhouse all the time. This is a fantastic butterfly plant. And then we have 3 sunflowers in 3 different sizes. The little sunflower, which is extremely tolerant of drought, and it only grows about 2 feet tall. I collected the seed for this at Shambhala Mountain Center in Red Feather Lakes. And Helianthus natalii is the complete opposite. It's 8 to 10 feet tall, and it's really kind of a swamp plant. but you will get incredible goldfinches on this if you have these sunflowers. They will they're drawn to the flowers when they're in bloom, and then they will flock to this plant when it's in going to seed. And I always love walking through our garden in the fall because there's just flocks of birds that come for the seeds. And the Maximilian sunflower, you can see there's some kind of bee on the photograph here, and that one is kind of the middle size. That will grow, depending on moisture, about 3 or 4 feet tall. This is another seed that we collected at Chambala Mountain Center, and it's a meadow gentian. I always thought of it when I lived up in that area as the harbinger of fall. It's the last thing to bloom in the fall. And Gaillardia aristata is great because it once it begins to bloom, it will continue until from midsummer until late in the fall. That's called indeterminate. So it actually doesn't have an end period for blooming. It'll just bloom until the frost takes it out. The Erysimum, the western wildflower, is in bloom in our nursery now. So that's an early spring flower. And Eriogonum arcuatum is that's something that'll bloom fairly early, like in late May. And that's also evergreen. It's a little bit different than some of the other Eriogonums that we may have seen before, like the umbulatum. Originon vatensis, I don't have a picture. It looks like the Originon speciosus next to it, but it's quite short. So hence the name early blue top fleabane. So at the most, it grows about 10 inches tall. The showy fleabane is a blue daisy-like flower. Again, those disc-type flowers tend to attract generalist pollinators. And this one spreads readily and blooms throughout most of the month of June. And there are Origeron compositus, which is really kind of a very tiny, like a rock garden plant. Datura wrightii is actually an annual, a self-seeding annual, but it will readily reseed. And there is nothing as show-stopping as these enormous 5 foot or 5 to 6 inch across white trumpets on this plant. They're fantastic. We grow 2 kinds of the dahlias. Currently, we only have the white prairie clover, but this is very attractive to native bees, and we will have more of the purple prairie clover as well. The Coreopsis tinctoria is an annual that readily reseeds, and Coreopsis lanceolata is a perennial. And these are plants for generalist pollinators. The calorow, or poppy mallow, this is a plant that does not like water at all. And so you can plant this in a very harsh, the places they call hell strips between your sidewalk and your street. They thrive in hot, dry locations. Astragalus drummondii is kind of an unusual plant for gardens, but all the astragalus we have quite a few astragalus that are native in Colorado. We have 3 species of the Asclepias: the showy milkweed, the swamp milkweed, and also, I'm not seeing the picture here, but we have the butterfly milkweed. And actually, all 3 of these species are extremely attractive to butterflies as well as bees, and there's quite a few insects that will come to them. We have 3 species of columbines. One is yellow, and one red, and one blue. And these are, in Colorado, they tend to grow at higher elevations. They require a little bit of moisture, and bloom in the early spring, except for Aquilegia chrysantha, which will bloom throughout most of the summer and can tolerate drier conditions. We have several different artemisias, the fringe sage. This one we call Shambhala sage because I collected it at Shambhala Mountain Center. It's like the prairie sage, but it will only grow about 10 inches tall, very deeply fringed. Allium cernulum is an important plant for the pollinators that come out of dormancy very early in the spring. It's an early blooming plant. Agastache is tall. This is native to the prairie, a bluish flower. Amsonia is one that's very tolerant of drought, and prairie dropseed is very tolerant of drought, and saltgrass is very tolerant of alkalinity and salt. So that's a great, if you have a rain garden, that's where you might be getting road salt coming off of your parking lot or driveway. This plant will thrive. And it looks like buffalo grass. You never have to mow it. It only will grow about 10 inches tall. Our state grass, the blue grama grass, looks like eyebrows on a stick. That's a warm season grass that requires very little moisture. And buffalo grass, which of course can be used as a lawn, and it spreads readily. Big blue stem is another warm season tall grass. And yellow Indian grass is the Indian rice grass. Looks like it has little rice on it, and that's another warm season grass. Verbena stricta looks like a blue candelabra, and that grows out in the prairie. The golden banner is a very early blooming plant. It's blooming right now in our garden, and that spreads pretty readily. Stanleya pinnata grows about 30 inches tall. It's a very, very striking plant. I have lots of pictures of butterflies on this flower. And then we have two checker mallows, the pink Neo-Mexicana, which grows in dry locations, and the white checker mallow, which grows in moister locations. There's another tansy aster, the Tanacida which has deeply cut foliage. Liachus pycnostachya, another great butterfly plant. Helenium is a late fall bloomer that grows out in the prairie. Joe pie weed can have huge flowers that is 8 inches across. It's very tall, likes a little bit of moisture, but it's a spectacular butterfly plant. The Western Virgin's Bower is our native clematis. The prairie sage. Anophelis margaritacea, the pearly everlasting, blooms in the fall, so it's good for attracting pollinators late in the season. Asclepias tuberosa is as the name says, the butterfly milkweed is extremely attractive to butterflies. We have a tall Ratibida that grows out in the prairie, pinnata, that grows about 30 inches tall. The Canada goldenrod, which blooms late in the year. The Porter's aster, and actually below it is the smooth aster. Obviously one's white and one's blue. And Verbena hastata, which is a very local wildflower that a deep blue, grows about 4, even 5 feet tall. And this really is a wetland plant. So if you have a location with a lot of moisture, that this is a great choice for that location. It's 12:45, so I do want to save some time for questions, and I'm going to jump out of sharing my screen here.
Jim, that was so fabulous. The photos are captivating, and you're so knowledgeable. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So I had only 2 questions come in through the chat box, and perhaps you could elaborate a little bit on how you're doing the online plant sales. It looked like that was actually the web page that you could actually purchase the plant from. I noticed the price tag. So if you want to talk about the online plant ordering and the in-person pickup.
Right. So, and it's interesting when all of this, I'll just go back a bit. In the past, we have always had in-person plant sales where people would come, walk around our nursery, look at things and pick things out. And in March, when things started closing down because of the COVID-19 and businesses were closing, and we really this is a nonprofit mission. I mean, our goal is like get these plants out where people can enjoy them and where pollinators have access to them. And so we created this online platform to try and get the plants out. We've had our first plant sale pickup day. So people ordered up to May 2nd and then came and collected their plants, like curbside pickup on May 2nd. Our next one is May 16th. The sales for the May 16th will close on Monday, May 11th. And that gives us enough time, takes us the whole week to pick these orders. And then our next pickup date after that will be May 30th. And like I say, our inventory changes all the time because we have things that are tiny now that will be available May 30th. So we're always updating that inventory. And we didn't know whether this was going to work or if people would order the plants, but it's working extremely well. I mean, we're a little bit overwhelmed actually about how successful this is, but our nursery is completely stocked and we keep good track of the inventory. So it's kind of it's part of a learning curve for us, and like everyone else, we're adjusting to a new normal.
Nice, thanks, Jim. Another question for you. This is more related to the High Plains Environmental Center. The Nature Center itself is closed. Are the trails open for birding and walking around and recreational purposes?
The trails are open 365 days a year from sunrise to sunset. And one of the things that if people are not familiar with High Plains Environmental Center, we're basically in the area that is northwest of Highway 34 and I-25. So we're in that area. We're just west of I-25. And the best way to access us is off of Boyd Lake Road in Loveland. And we have 275 acres, including the surfaces of the 2 lakes. And we have amazing birds here. We do have monthly bird walks, which are temporarily on hold, but you can also go to our website and see barn owls in our barn in a live stream. And you can watch them develop. We have Scott Rashid comes out, and he's the person who hosts our owl cam on the Colorado Avian Research and Rehabilitation Institute. And he will come out and band those owls at some point. So then we can track where the owls go, if they come back, and get information about the details of their life cycle. We also have a kestrel box on our building and so we have a live stream kestrel camera as well. We have an osprey nest with a pair of ospreys. We have great horned owls that are nesting here. Commonly we see red-tailed hawks, Swainson hawks, bald eagles in the winter, and lots of just wave after wave of migratory birds. Black-necked stilts and avocets and grebes nest here in the summer on our lakes. And we also see the palustrine birds like the meadowlarks and horned larks, and just waves after waves of birds tend to migrate through here. We have pelicans that we see in the summertime. So just tremendous amount of birds in a place that is basically an urban development. So that's the interesting thing. I call this 21st century conservation because in the 20th century, people were really trying to preserve the last great places before they got developed or whatever. Now, I think in the 21st century, we need to claw back some of what has been developed from agriculture or from development and design and build some habitat within the context of that. And that's what we're doing, and it's gratifying to see that it actually works. I mean, if you build it, they will come. And we've really noticed that in our gardens. Like I was saying, I walk around our gardens, I see flocks of goldfinches, I hear birds at all times of the year. You can really palpably feel what is happening in terms of the habitat and just by all the stuff that shows up.
That kind of parlays into another question by William. If you're out in natural areas, can you just look at the habitat, whether that be birds or the native plants? Can you tell the effects of climate change by walking around the natural areas or even out here at High Plains Environmental Center?
Well, anecdotally, I would just say it's, I got into what I do just because I love nature, I love plants and beauty, and I enjoy the colors in the fall. And I think 2 of the last 3 falls, we had our trees that were green, 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 dead. I mean, there was like no fall color. I mean, it just like green until it was like 5 degrees, and then the leaves just turned black and fell off. And most of the plants that I'm looking at are not really evolved in this climate. I think things like cottonwoods and our native plants tend to know better. I mean, there is no normal on the Front Range because whatever way the wind is blowing, we get our weather changing all the time. But it seems like we have a much colder, earlier fall than I've seen in the 20 years that I've lived in Colorado. I mean, I think what we're all seeing is less predictability in the season. And last year, we actually lost our first brood of, or at least the eggs of our barn owls. We had 11 eggs in there, but they didn't hatch because there was a extreme deep cold that even the female sitting on the eggs couldn't keep them alive. And so maybe that happened historically. We didn't always have a camera in there to watch, but that seems pretty extreme to lose a whole brood of eggs. I mean, so how the owls responded to that is they basically threw those eggs out and they started over. And it's interesting to see it will be interesting to see what happens. I mean, nature is nothing if not adaptive and creative, and whether species will be able to adapt rapidly enough to cope with and accommodate the changes in climate has yet to be seen.
Another question for you. For on the plant list for the website that you showed, if you click on each of the plants, I know you have the photographs, but if you click on the plants, will it tell you their preferred growing conditions and let you know if it's best for shade or container or dry? And perhaps you could elaborate on some of the best plants for shade or container gardens.
So you can hear me, right?
Yep.
I just clicked on one to give an example. The Solidago canadensis goldenrod. It gives a very basic description. The height and width is 30 inches by 18 inches. Water requirements, medium moisture. The like sun, the full sun. Flower color is deep yellow. Blooms late summer, fall, and fall. Wildlife values. It attracts bees and butterflies. So we just have just a very, very simple description there.
Gotcha.
But we actually, in our nursery, we have little plant cards with that information on it. But it gives you a general sense of when it blooms, what it attracts, what color it is, the size of it, and basic moisture conditions.
Does it also tell you great elevation to plant it at too? There's some folks on today's talk that are at 7,800 feet or higher in elevation. Does it talk about what plants would
Yeah,
thrive?
it doesn't, and that would be something worth including. Most of these plants, when I started out, as you said in my bio, I was the land steward at the Shambhala Mountain Center, and so that's a piece of land I know extremely well, and I have permission to collect seed there. So a lot of the plants that we grow originally were a seed stock from Red Feather Lakes, which is 8,000 feet. So the majority of our plants are adapted to that elevation, and some are not. People can always email me, jim@verbitat.org, if you had specific questions. There are some things like the Desert 4 o'clock, which is really from the Four Corners area, and would not. I'm thinking, actually, we have grown them no, they don't grow at that elevation. The milkweeds would be sort of marginal. Certainly the butterfly milkweed would not be at that high a level. But the majority of them would be fine up to the montane zone at around 8,000 feet.
Do you sell to other nurseries, so satellite locations, specifically Harlequin Gardens, Jack's, anywhere on the western slope, or can you only pick up the plants here at High Plains Environmental Center? In trying to make the nursery work, like from an economic perspective, we've tried just about everything. But our preference is to, as a nonprofit, this is like a public outreach, and our preference is to market directly to people. And so we do work with other organizations that are creating pollinator gardens. One of the things that is very important to people in that context is that, you might have native plants, but the grower puts neonicotinoid pesticide in them, and when your pollinators come to the plant, they'll die. So, it completely defeats the purpose. And I did a little post on our Facebook page. We use the green lacewing insects, and we release them in our nursery, on 2-week intervals, and that keeps aphids and spider mites and stuff under control. And we don't use any pesticides. And so that's important to people who are creating pollinator gardens. So a lot of the things that we've sold have gone into pollinator gardens in different places. And I grow for my friend Amy Yarger at the Butterfly Pavilion. We've grown things for Denver Botanic Gardens and other partner organizations. Primarily what we're wanting to do, I think now that we have this online format, we're going to try and stick with this and just direct market to the end user. Yellow jackets, how do you keep those away from your hummingbird plants? It's getting the hummingbirds there.
Yellow jackets are not attracted to plants. They're attracted to bologna sandwiches. So you'll notice if you're eating like meat or a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, then you'll have yellow jackets come to that. But yellow jackets typically do not come to plants.
Gotcha. Thank you. All right. Will HPEC be growing plants for the late August rock garden or native plant sale?
I'm not sure what rock garden, the North American Rock Garden Society?
Lisa Olson, if you want to unmute yourself. See if I can do that. We can come back to that question.
Okay. I actually may have had a conversation with Paniotti at Denver Botanic Gardens about this, but currently I don't have anything lined up for that.
Okay.
We are very well stocked this year, and we're just going to keep trying to get the plants out there, and would be interested in any opportunities like that.
I think we'll have time for 2 more questions. One, can you kind of elaborate on how to best prepare the site for your native plants, and also, is bark mulch recommended?
Those are good questions. If you go out in your yard and you look up and you see leaves of a tree over your head, then yes, I would say bark mulch. I'm a New England native. Bark mulch makes sense in the New England because it's a big dark forest. But you look where most of these plants come from, they're growing in gravel, and they have like a gravelly soil on the surface. And that's where you see a lot of Colorado flowers. It's funny when we say Colorado native plants, in many ways we have more in common with Santa Fe and Cheyenne, Wyoming than we do with Aspen and Vail, because of those elevation difference. I mean, Aspen and Vail are more like Montana and Canada than they are Fort Collins and Loveland because of the elevation difference. But in general, I think it's beneficial to know where those plants come from and to amend the soil accordingly. I mean, most people in Colorado live on the Front Range. It's an alkaline clay, pretty much up and down the Front Range is more or less the same. Sandier in some places, clay in others. But these plants tend to like good drainage. And one of the things that I do is, like, landscapers like to make everything flat. And I like to have these undulating like hills in the landscape, because a lot of plants don't like to grow on flat. And people even say like the prairie is flat. No part of the prairie is flat. It's like rolling hills, and there's canyons and all kinds of stuff. So having some undulation in the grade is important. Building up little gravelly hills for things that like more drainage is very important. And so the plants don't really need compost, but I add compost and sand just to help to generate the microbiota that has been killed from the, if you park construction equipment on your clay soil, it'll push all the oxygen out of it and basically kill the soil. So if you add compost, it does help to get that microbiota growing again. And sand, if you just add sand to clay, that's concrete. But if you add the organic material, it helps to create more permeability. And that's the main thing that you want with native plants. A lot of these plants will get their roots like 6 feet into the ground, but they need the oxygen in the soil, and they need like good permeable soil. So that's one of the things that I do, is make an undulating grade and add amendments that will help to create more permeability in the soil. And generally, I think that like a pea stone gravel is the best kind of mulch for our native plants.
Wonderful. Jim, thank you so much for all your information. I have received a few chats that people had to leave for another training or something else. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I do plan on sending a recap email with all of those pertinent links. And I also included in the chat box feature both my and Jim's email as well. So if you have some of those additional questions, we'd be more than happy to chat with you offline. We're going to be doing this every Thursday, so feel free to join us, even if you just want to come for the Q&A portion or just the presentation. Next week, we have Michelle Bohannon. She's a master gardener up in Cheyenne, Wyoming. She'll be talking about growing native plants from seed. She's with us today, actually, down there. May 21st, Don Ireland. He's a wonderful Habitat Hero champion and has done a lot of techniques for water saving measures for his HOA down in Denver called Cherry Creek HOA 3. And he'll share his success story and tips on working with HOA. And then on May 28th, we have David Solomon, Chief Horticulturist and founder of High Country Gardens, talking about rare native plants in Colorado. And we even have some June webinar series kind of working on the back end as well. The first one in June will be all about native bees. That's on June 4th. We don't have those event links posted yet, but know that we're working on securing speakers in June as well. You can find all of that out at rockies.audubon.org/events. And again, here's our contact information if you didn't see it in the chat box, but it has our emails, our web addresses, and phone numbers as well for reaching out to myself or Jim. I'll leave that up for 1 second. And just overall, a big thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know we're dealing with online events, and thanks for bearing with me with our technological issues at the beginning. I'm glad we got that squared away. But we so appreciate you joining us because you truly are what hope looks like to a bird. You're giving them a voice in our region. And we couldn't do this without your support and your enthusiasm and passion. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts for joining us and asking such thoughtful questions. We wish we could get to them all and just stay with you all afternoon and just chat plants because it's a lot of fun. So everyone, I hope you be safe. I will stay on a little bit longer. There's some outstanding questions that I'll kind of answer to on the chat boxes as well. But Jim, any final parting words for the group?
Thanks so much, Jamie. Thanks for inviting me and giving us a chance to talk about our project here. And thanks everyone for joining us today.
I'll stop the recording now.